Welcome to 30 Minutes Away. Good morning. Good day. Good evening.
You took the long way home.
Good night.
I don't mind.
That joke will be apparent later on.
That sweet old car and stay a while.
The writing room has been busy writing words that can be spoken between people.
I got a chair for two and a crowd. Let's sit.
It was rainy. Woo, it was rainy today. Southern skies were crying. Crying hard.
When you're walking slow.
The story is The Spendthrift. It's a fantasy story. See you on the other side.
Tace Mallow did not say good morning. His neighbour Wenna stood in the canal lane doorway, her face soft with the hour, her lips already parted. He saw the intent. He turned away. The greeting died unspoken. She made do with a nod. 2 syllables. He had made the calculation so many times it required no calculation at all. 2 syllables was a lamp burning for no reason. A coin dropped through a grate. He dressed in the grey half-dark of his flat, one canal-level room in the Low Tallows, rented cheap because of the damp, the smell, the silence. He did not mind any of those things. The silence was, in fact, the attraction. Silence cost nothing. On his desk, brass instruments in a velvet case, a ledger, a stack of chits already filled out the night before to carry his morning's business without speaking. He was a counter, employed by the ledger house of Marrent, and he was very good at his work because he felt no pity and wasted nothing. Every soul born in Marrent arrived with a tally. Not money, though money was in it, not blood, words. A finite count of every word that soul would ever speak, stamped into the bones at birth by processes theologians argued about and accountants did not bother with. When you had spoken your last, you went hushed, no warning, mid-sentence if that was how the count fell. Hushed and silent forever. The hushed moved through the city like ghosts, present, breathing, eyes tracking the world with dim comprehension, but gone from it. Tace could hear the tallies. That was the gift, the burden, the profession. Other counters used the brass instruments to measure. Tace needed them only to confirm what his ears already told him. The world was full of the sound of counts depleting, a soft rhythmic dropping, like water dripping from a leaf into a still canal, steady when someone was careful, fast when they were reckless, a sound like counted coins. He picked up his case. He did not say good morning to the city either. The Low Tallows was quiet at this hour, always quiet. People moved through the lanes with their chits and their hand signs, merchants posting painted boards of prices, children playing in mime, games they had invented for silence, elaborate and oddly beautiful. A woman on a bridge mouthed something to herself and caught it before it became sound. Tace walked without sound of his own. The appraisal list today carried 3 addresses in the deepest part of the Tallows, in the lanes called Frith's End, where even the canal ran sluggish and the lampposts were older, the glass yellowed. He worked through the first 2 quickly. An elderly dockworker, his tally drawing low, a weaver steadier than expected. He marked his ledger in the efficient shorthand the house used, slid his chits under doors where questions were asked, and moved on. The 3rd address was a room above a pickle works. The smell reached him on the stairs. He knocked. After a moment, the door opened, not on an adult, but on a child of perhaps 9, sharp-eyed and brown-haired, who looked at him, looked at his velvet case, and said immediately, "Oh, you're from the ledger house. Nan said you were coming. She's out at the market. Come in then." 9 words. 11. 22, in a short run of breath, unstudied, unhoarded. Tace's ear caught the count. He stopped moving. He had been in this profession for 11 years. He had developed over those years a particular quality of attention. He knew what a tally sounded like at various stages, The confident drop of a young person barely making a dent, the quickening drip of someone past middle life, the rapid-fire diminishment of the old. He knew the acceleration that came from grief, from illness, from recklessness. He did not know this sound. Pim Castor's count was dropping like a pail of coins kicked off a tower, not trickling, pouring. She chattered about Nanvero and the market and a canal lane cat called Smudge, and whether he wanted tea, and with every word the drop accelerated, and Tace's ear told him what 11 years of counting told him. This child had weeks, not decades, not years, weeks. She was 9 years old and talking about a cat. He opened his brass case and measured. 3 instruments, applied in the order the house prescribed. The readings were unambiguous. He checked again. He stood in the middle of the room above the pickleworks while Pim watched him with calm curiosity, clearly accustomed to adults who measured silently and tried to account for what he was hearing. Not illness. Illness had a sound of its own, a grinding quality. This was depletion, pure depletion, as if someone were drawing the words from her without her spending them at all. He reached for a chit. "How long have you lived in this building?" "Since I was born," Pim said. "Nan's looked after me since my mum went hushed." The count dropped and dropped. Magister Crew's office sat on the 4th floor of the Ledger House, above the rain and the noise of the Ardway below. The Ardway was always loud. That was the point of it. Wealth announced itself in Marrent by volume, merchants bellowing prices at competitors, rich women calling greetings across bridges in carrying tones. The sound of prosperity, which was also the sound of tallies spent freely, because there were always more to buy, up there in those bright, profligate streets. Crew was a lean, pale man, with a voice he used the way a surgeon used a scalpel. He listened to Tace's report without interrupting, and then was quiet for longer than the facts required. "Mark her naturally terminal," Crew said. "Close the file." Tace wrote, "The rate of depletion is anomalous, not consistent with natural process." Crew read it, set it down. Naturally terminal. There is variation in such things. Not at this rate. Tace pushed the chit back. Crew looked at him then, not at the paper. "Mallow, you have served the house for 11 years. Your tally is in excellent health, one of the best managed counts in the city." A pause. "We manage it for you, of course, as we do for all counters. It would be a shame to see the balance disturbed." The air in the room changed. Tace understood. He had always understood things quickly. It was what made him good at his work. The house controlled counters' tallies. A counter who asked wrong questions might find one morning that his balance was not what it had been, might find the count had run further than he knew, might go hushed and leave no record of why. He picked up the chit. He signed the file. He walked out. On the bridge outside, he stood over the canal and watched a boat carrying barrels of dye pass beneath him, the boatman mute, moving by long and practiced habit. Most things in the Tallows could be conducted in silence. Tace went home. He did not speak. He did not sleep. He went back. It took him 3 days. 3 days of sitting in the grey light and accounting to himself in chits he burned in the candle flame because no one was there to read them. 3 days of knowing what he knew. On the 4th morning he returned to Frith's End. Pim answered the door. Her count had dropped further. She said, "Oh, you're back," and the drop sounded like gravel in a drain, and Tace had to breathe through it. "I need to tell you something." He offered the chit. "You can just talk to me," Pim said. "I don't mind." He hadn't talked, truly talked, not chits, not functional syllables, in years. He opened his mouth and felt the weight of every word like a coin on his tongue, and then, with a deliberateness that was almost violent, he spent one. "Something," he said, "is taking your words." His ear registered it, the familiar dropping coin sound of a word spent, but also something else, something he had no name for, a faint answering quality, as if the word had gone to Pim rather than merely away from him. He filed it and moved on. He told her what he suspected. in short sentences, because every word still cost him. She listened without interrupting, which surprised him for a child. When he finished, she said, "So someone is stealing my voice," and the matter-of-factness of it struck him somewhere he didn't usually let things reach. "Yes," he said. "How do we stop them?" He had come back without a plan. Hearing her ask, he had one. "Under the tallows," he said. "The canals. Whatever device is taking the words must connect to the canal system to transmit. I need to find it." "I'll help," Pim said at once. "No, you need to rest. Don't talk more than you must." He pressed the chit into her hands. She made an expression that was not quite agreement. "I'll be careful," she said, which cost her 2 words, and the count dropped, and Tace heard them land like 2 pennies in the bottom of a drying well. He found the skim device that evening in the silt-black undercanal beneath Frith's End, a brass thing the size of a bread loaf fixed to a submerged piling, connected by a pipe he followed upstream for 40 yards before it emerged into a locked counting room below a warehouse. The address of record, checked against the house ledger, was registered to a shell firm whose listed principal was Magister Crew. He did not move quickly enough. The next morning his count dropped. Not the natural measured drop of a word spent. He had spent no words. This was different. This was the house's hand in his tally, a scooping, vertiginous fall, as if a trap-door had opened in the floor of himself. He sat at his desk and felt it and could not stop it, and it went on long enough that he had to put his hands flat on the wood and breathe. When it stopped, half his life savings were gone. He had spent 11 years building that reserve. He had not said good morning to anyone in 11 years. He had written chits for the baker and the rent man and communicated to colleagues in margin notes, had not spoken at parties or chatted on bridges or sung, not once, not a single song, because songs were prodigal, songs were waste, every verse a fortune thrown to the water, half gone. An hour later, a note arrived from the ledger house. No signature. "Close the file. This is your only further notice." He ran to Frith's End. Pim was lying on her pallet when he arrived, Nan Vero beside her, the old woman's face pulled tight with the look of someone who has been afraid for a long time and does not know how to stop. Pim's eyes were open. She looked at Tace and tried to smile, and he heard her count, and his stomach dropped. By nightfall, he had the evidence, an appraisal file with anomalous readings, a skim device with the house's registration marks, a counting room in Crew's name. It did not matter. The house had accelerated the drain remotely. He could hear the difference, the change in the sound of her tally, faster now, metered and deliberate, a machine's rhythm. Someone at a lever had decided that Pim Castor would go hushed before she could testify to anything. He sat on the edge of her pallet, his own count, half gone, the rest within the house's reach. If he went to any one official, another note would come, or no note at all, just silence. He put his face in his hands. "Tell me something," Pim said. Her voice was thin now. Each word cost visibly. He could hear the weight behind every syllable. "You don't have to save them," he said. "Your words." "I know." A small pause. "Nan told me about the tally." Another breath. "I always knew. I just didn't mind." He didn't know what to say to that. He found, after a moment, that he was going to say something anyway. He told her a story. Not a chit, not a question, not a functional sentence with an appointment for purpose. A story, the kind his mother had told him when he was small, before he had learned to count, before he had learned that counting was survival. He made it up as he spoke. It was about a bird that couldn't fly but could sing, and how the song turned out to be worth more than flight, and how at the end the bird discovered it could fly after all, not despite the singing, but because of it. It was not a sophisticated story. He spent words anyway, fast, without weighing, without calculating, without listening for his own count falling, and then he noticed he was listening for it, and what he heard stopped him mid-sentence. His tally held. not perfectly. There was some spend, some natural decrement of breath and voice, but not the coin dropping in a well sound he had known all his life. Something else, a replenishment, faint, barely measurable, but there, like water returning to a glass while you were still pouring from it. And Pym's count steadied. He sat in the silence and understood. Words sold depleted the seller. Words hoarded depleted the hoarder. He had not known this, had not known the house lied about it, had thought his silence was saving him. But the silence had been quietly costing him all along, the way a miser's gold corrodes in a locked chest. And words given, freely given, without contract, without ledger, without expectation of return, did something else entirely. Did not deplete, did not diminish. The scarcity was manufactured. The whole city's silence, the Tallow's whispered terror, the Ardway's booming commerce in purchased tallies, it was all built on a lie the house had not invented so much as carefully maintained, generation after generation, by keeping the math opaque, the poor afraid, the counters employed and indebted and mute. He sat with Pym, and the truth of it moved through him like the first warm current in a cold canal. He broke the skim device first, a hammer from the toolbox Nan Vero kept in the building's cellar. 3 blows on the brass housing, and the machine went quiet. He heard Pym's count settle from across the room, the metered acceleration stopping, the rhythm returning to something that was not healthy, not yet, but was hers again and no one else's. He had evidence, an appraisal file, the device itself, stamped with the house's marks, the counting room below the warehouse. He knew what would happen if he went through official channels. He went to the square instead. The square in Frith's End was not much of a square, a widened section of canal lane, a stone basin that had once been a fountain, benches worn pale by years of the poor sitting quietly on them. In the early morning, a handful of people were beginning to cross it. The first workers of the day, a woman with a handcart, 2 children on their way to wherever children went. Tace Mallow stood at the centre and opened his mouth. "I am a counter of the Ledger House." His voice came out rough from disuse. He had not spoken at this volume in a very long time. It sounded strange to him, too large, a sound he had always been careful not to make. "My name is Tace Mallow. I have been a counter for 11 years. I have spent that time telling myself that silence was wealth, that every word unspoken was a coin saved. I was wrong about that, and I was wrong about other things, and I need to tell you what those things are." People stopped, silently, the way people in the Tallows stopped. No exclamations, no questions called out across the lane. They simply turned and looked at this man in the square who was apparently spending his words without any visible return. More of them stopped, 12, 2 dozen. Nan Vero appeared at the edge of the square, supporting Pym, who had insisted on coming despite everything and would not be talked out of it, and Pym watched him with her clear, unfrightened eyes, and Tace kept going. He told them about the skim device. He told them about the under-canal in Frith's End, the pipe, the counting room, the shell firm, the name of the magister who ran it. He told them what tallies actually were, what depletion actually measured, not a fixed sacred doom, not an inviolable natural law, but a mechanism the house understood and had spent decades adjusting to its own purposes. He told them what he had discovered sitting on a child's pallet in the grey hours, that words given freely, truly given, without expectation of ledgered return, did not deplete, that the scarcity the whole city's terror was built around was real in one sense only. It was real for those who sold and hoarded, who treated speech as coin. For everyone else, it was a story the market needed them to believe. He talked and talked, and the words came, and his count held. He talked about the Ardway and what the house was selling up in those bright, loud streets where the wealthy bought words they had not lived to earn and spent them on declarations and pleasantries and did not think about where those words had been before. He talked about the hushed, the silent ones the city had learned to walk past, assumed to have simply run dry when many of them had been drained. He talked about Pim Castor, 9 years old, who had talked freely and generously her whole short life and had been targeted precisely for that reason, because the free-hearted spenders were the ones who ran out fastest, or were supposed to. The square was full now. Not a riot. The Tallows did not riot, could not afford the words for it, but a crowd of people who had stopped and stayed, who were now speaking to each other in low, urgent voices, trading chits that said, "Did you hear?" and "I always wondered," and "My neighbour went hushed last year." Testing the theory with their own tongues, pressing small words back and forth between themselves and listening, each of them, for what the exchange cost, and finding that it cost less than they had always been taught. The house would have questions to answer. Crewe's name was now in the air above the Tallows, spoken aloud, where the weather could get at it. The house had documents in a counting room that 3 of Nanvero's neighbours had already seen and could describe. The architecture of scarcity had other pillars. Tace held no illusion that a morning in a square ended 100 years of commerce. Some of the people in this crowd would go home afraid. Some would recant. The building still stood, but the square had heard. He found Pim at the edge of the crowd, Nan's arm around her, her tally still depleted. The device's damage didn't undo itself in an hour, and he knew it. She would need care and time and the kind of attention that went beyond what Tace knew how to provide. There were things still broken that this morning had not fixed and would not. She looked up at him. He looked down at her. And Tace Mallow, the most miserly soul in Marrent, who had not wasted a syllable in 11 years, who had written chits to the baker and turned his face from neighbours and refused to spend 2 words on another person's mourning, Tace Mallow said, "Good morning." He said it the way a man says a thing he has been waiting his whole adult life to say. He said it freely, without counting, without weighing, without a chit or a gesture or any of the 1,000 small replacements he had used for the 2 syllables it cost to acknowledge that another person existed in the world alongside him, and that this was, on balance, a good thing. Pim smiled. "Good morning," she said. The count did not fall the way it should have. Around them, in the waking Tallows, people were talking.
I'll tell you, honestly, at first I didn't quite buy it. I figured, if they could talk, they would figure this out, like, right away. And I gave that to the writing room. And they came back with, that's kind of the point. What an interesting story. So what they said, and what I think is important to start this whole conversation off, because I think it's a good conversation, is that you have to take the story at face value. You have to suspend your disbelief. You have to assume this is the fantasy world and this is how it works in this world. People count their words. Because that's kind of the point. That's where, by using that fantasy mechanic, you can talk about profound things. So this is a story about a man who hasn't said good morning in 11 years, and what finally breaks him open. Pim. In Marrent, your words are literally counted. You're born with a finite tally of words. You spend them, then you go silent forever. But what if this scarcity was manufactured? Okay, let's tour this world. There's the Ledger House, there's Ardway, there's the Low Tallows, there's this skim device, the Ledger House, economy. Speech is a currency. There's a finite tally of words that you're given. And truthfully, there's a finite tally of words we're all given, if we want to look at it that way. They're stamped into your bones at birth. And the hushed go silent when they outlive their words. Ardway is a loud, wealthy, profligate center of words. People shout them from the rooftops. Versus this low tallows, a quiet, hoarding, terrified, low-class kind of town. Then there's these skim devices, the house's machine that harvests his words from the vulnerable. This undercanal apparatus. Tace Mallow did not say good morning. He is miserly with his words. He calls it like a coin falling through a grate, or leaving a lamp on that doesn't need to be on. This is how he sees speaking to others. The transformation is the transformation of Tace. Tace Mallow changes over the course of the story because of Pim. Pim is a 9-year-old girl that is not afraid to speak her words and speaks them even though she has very few left. Pim is this counter of words, and he's counting, and he realizes Pim doesn't have very many left, and she just keeps talking about Smudge the cat and all kind of different things, and she just doesn't really care. And it shocks him. The writing room wanted to set it up this way, and we went back and forth. But I was saying it's just not, it's hard to believe that nobody came to this idea that you could spend your words and they wouldn't deplete. And they said back to me, well, that's kind of the point. Freely given words don't deplete. Is that true? And does that follow you around to your day? Are you a Pim or are you a Tace when you're standing in a grocery line? What if it's not just words, but it's minutes? Are you miserly with your minutes because you're afraid that you're going to have more things to do than you have hours in the day? Are you going to hoard your time? Are you going to push your way to the front of the checkout aisle? Or will you let someone who's got fewer groceries go in front of you? Are you hoarding your words? Are you hoarding your attention? Are you holding it because you're counting down the last little bits that you have? Or are you like Pim, so excited that you have any at all, just freely giving your words? The funny thing is that Tace has this transformation, but Pim doesn't. Pim, she's still dying. She may not have very many words left. The story is not answered when it comes to the end. It's still up in the air. So let me just leave you with these obvious questions. If you're hoarding your words, your time, your presence, are you protecting yourself? Or has this world system already won? What would change in your day if you stopped calculating the cost of your attention and just spent it? For correspondence, write podcasts@pipchi.com. That's PIPCHI.com. Until next time, until next story.